Given the current situation of the United States, one of the largest questions on a lot of people's minds is how is the rest of the world doing during this time? Recently, we were able to collect some comms called the Langley Report. Based on the name and the nature of these reports, we now have confirmation that the CIA is still active globally, at least in some sort of capacity. But what information is contained in this report, and is the rest of the world faring as badly as the United States during this time?
Status update. Sync with Mexican Ambassador Arturo Lechuga. Major urban areas are decimated and rural areas in the Baja Peninsula are fine.
Well, shit, Zara. I guess we should take a vacation at Cabo.
Not funny, sir.
Lighten up. The world's fucked whether we like it or not.
It should come as no surprise that the United States' neighboring country of Mexico has been hit pretty hard by the outbreak. Major cities have broken down, but rural areas, including the landmass to the left of the Gulf of California, have remained unaffected, though the fleeing of residents from urban centres may change this over time. However, it's the border to the south that could present larger concerns for Mexico over the coming months.
Central and South America have fared relatively poorly. The breakdown in government services has factionalized the survivors, and they've coalesced into warlord factions, often led by former cartels with strong regional paramilitary power.
Cartels. Fuck.
Not solely, sir, but certainly, without markets for their products, cartels have consolidated control over regions. We have reports of violent clashes with existing governmental militaries as well.
Well, that's just fucking perfect.
If comparing the state of Central and South America to the United States, these countries seem to be in a much worse position. While the US has had an uprising of hostile factions, the cartels have been active in South America for over 60 years. With the collapse of the local governments, very little has been able to stop them from carving out new territory. Although the market for their general distribution of drugs has become difficult for them to accommodate, they are now fighting over and controlling whole regions and their remaining populations, as well as the minimal supplies that are available. What little is left of government forces are undersupplied and spread too thin to provide any sort of resistance to the cartel expansion. The main concern for Mexico and the US is where they will turn to next when the food and medicine dries up.
Status update. Sync with Canadian intelligence. Major urban areas are decimated, and Canada's National Emergency Strategic Stockpile has been activated. Most of the western half of the country has dodged the worst of it. Rural BC is mostly unscathed.
I'm sensing a theme here, Zara. Live out in BFE. You're probably fine.
Yes, sir, that seems to be correct.
Those son of a bitch preppers ain't gonna let anyone live this down.
That's the least of our concerns, sir.
To the north, much like Mexico, populated areas have been hit hard. Being the closest country to the point of where the outbreak first struck, Canada had little time to react. However, the western side of the country seems to be faring a little better, where stockades have been put in place to stop the free movement of outsiders from infecting these communities.
Status update. Official report from the EU. Despite political paralysis around committing people to quarantine, many European countries have weathered the outbreak well. Healthcare systems manage treatments, and they've shown a high rate of success in treating the symptoms.
Sounds like a load of socialist bullshit.
The numbers don't lie, sir. That said, the collapse of their trading partners has significantly impacted urban centers with service economies.
Europe has fared a little better than most. Western EU countries have done well with isolating themselves from the worst of the outbreak and have managed to keep their healthcare systems intact, allowing them the opportunity to adequately quarantine and treat the sick. However, although they are performing better with the outbreak of the virus, their problems are only just beginning. The breakdown of the global economy is quickly catching up with them. More than 50% of food alone is required to be imported in order to feed the population. Europe faces some difficult times in the months ahead.
Status update. As expected, not much in the way of information. Global economic trade collapse seems like it has an outsized impact on the Middle East. OPEC countries are actively looking to trade crude stockpiles for critical medicine and supplies.
Well, it's a damn good thing we restarted drilling in Anwar. Would have been even worse if we had to trade for oil.
Sir, Anwar drilling operations have been completely halted since the outbreak.
Why the hell would they stop?
I believe they experienced difficulty drilling without sufficient staff.
Unsurprisingly, information on this region is shaky. But regardless of impact from the virus, they seem to be in a position of power. Although they are feeling the effects of the current global trade situation, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries have vast stockpiles of crude oil, of which all countries are running desperately low at this stage. So they'll be finding themselves in a good position to control the trade market going forward.
Status update. Sync with agent station outside Moscow. Despite a major effort to contain the spread, criminal enterprises thwarted the quarantine just enough to ensure the containment failed.
I hope that bare-chested buffoon suffered.
I'm not sure that's pertinent, sir.
I don't give a fuck. He's a menace to stability and peace.
Russia has failed to contain the virus. They've essentially found themselves in a similar position to what the United States is in. Rising hostile factions have put a stop to what little procedures the government were able to put in place, including quarantines and other containment facilities. It's unclear how their government is doing, but signs are pointing to them having hunkered down to weather out the storm. Given Russia's vast geographical diversity, it's unlikely that all regions of Russia have been hit. Secluded communities are in a good position right now, as a large number have had to live self-sufficiently and independent of the larger Russian community for decades now. It's possible that the government has relocated to one of these sites while they figure out what to do next.
Status update. Reports out of Asia have been mixed. Economic devastation and catastrophic loss of life have been reported across the continent, but many regions seem to be largely untouched as well. Chinese authorities claim the situation is under control, but satellite imagery shows heavy population migration out of urban areas.
Mixed how? What are we talking about?
Initial news out of larger metropolitan areas show devastating viral spread, but some Asian countries have had little issue in rapid quarantine procedures.
So, you're saying that human rights abuses have their benefits?
Not at all, sir. I'm simply stating the reality that some countries have had less political backlash with strict lockdowns.
Again, it isn't surprising that the information coming out of the countries in Asia, or more specifically, China, are sending mixed messages. The integrity of the publicly provided information has been questionable for decades. Larger centres have been hit hard, but because of the isolated nature of a number of countries and the communities within them, the further spread of the virus seems to have been halted. Quarantines have been put in place, and the government as a whole seems completely intact. A number of these countries should see no problems in making it through this situation, given that they have now survived the worst of the outbreak.
Status update. Report from our ambassador to India. Widespread outbreak and nearly complete social and economic collapse following in its wake. Major population centers have been devastated by the virus.
India? Why the fuck am I gonna be worried about India right now? Have you seen the state of this place?
In nuclear weapons, sir?
What about them?
India has them. If the government collapses and can't protect their stockpile, that's an issue for us and, really, everyone.
India's largely overpopulated landmass is the perfect breeding ground for a large-scale and deadly pandemic such as the dollar flu. Given its highly contagious nature, even the best reaction to this virus would have seen them struggle to contain the spread. The entire country seems to have been decimated. And although this is disheartening to see, there are larger concerns around this. Recent estimates suggest that India has around 150 to 200 nuclear warheads, and has enough weapons-grade plutonium that could be used for further production of nuclear weapons. Given their geographical location, and the fact that the Middle East is the only region with an excess of oil, there is a high risk of neighbouring extremist groups willing to take advantage of the current global crisis and commandeer the nuclear arsenal to further their own agenda.
Status update. Such a low population density and already spotty government support structures across many African nations, Much seems to remain largely unchanged.
I don't give a flying fuck about Africa. Why are you even briefing me about it?
It's my job, sir.
Well, stop briefing me on a continent with virtually no geopolitical significance. What the shit would we even do about Africa?
Care. Sir, you know I still have family there. Sir?
Although major centres are likely to have been hit, especially to the south and north of the country, the majority of Africa's population has remained untouched during this time. Decades of isolation and minimal contact from the outside world have left the bulk of African countries in one of the best positions that one could hope to be in during this time. Even the global economic collapse should have little impact on the majority of these communities.
Status update. Immediate quarantine set in place and major points of ingress to Japan were quickly shut down. While this prevented the spread of the virus, food and supply shortages have been causing havoc. Fishing communities are pitching in to fill the shortfall.
Must be nice to be an island nation.
I'm not sure starvation is better than the virus, sir.
I am. This is a plague of biblical proportions.
It's not a plague, sir.
Stop being so goddamn pedantic.
Japan faced this virus with a clinical precision that was able to quickly and efficiently shut down any traces of the dollar flu from taking hold of the general population. However, much like the situation in Western Europe, Japan typically imports 60% of the food required to feed its large population, and with the global trade having been completely shut down, extra pressure is being placed on the fishing communities to fill this gap. Although Japan has effectively quarantined the whole country from the virus, their problems are only about to start, as they quickly run through the remaining vital supplies, with no clear answer for the future. So, other than the fact that this Brigadier General Green is a complete asshat, what else were we able to learn of what's happening across the globe? It's highlighted that although there are some countries that are in a worse position than the US, there are still a number of countries that are in a better, more sustainable situation. However, even these countries are facing some difficult times ahead. The more advanced, highly populated areas will be feeling the after effect of the collapse of the global trade and economy, where starvation, sanitation, and medical supplies will quickly become an issue. I had initially gone into quite a bit of depth with each of these countries, digging right into the likely outcome based on the unique geographical, political, and societal situation each of these regions faces. But unfortunately, it was getting just a little bit too real, especially based on what's currently happening in the world, and I didn't want to appear as being insensitive to what a lot of you are facing these days. So, although the map I'll put together will still show some of this, I've tried to tone it down a little bit. Being based in New Zealand, it can be easy to forget about the fact that there is a global pandemic going on. Speaking of which, these comms really didn't cover New Zealand or Australia. I'm sure we were meant to come under Asia, but let me update that map for you. Relatively isolated from the rest of the world, Australia and New Zealand have done pretty well in closing off borders and setting up quarantine for those who have had the potential to have been infected. Given the low population density of each of these nations, self-sustainability of basic requirements like food won't be a problem in the long run. While I'm at it, New Zealand has a long history of innovation to help them get through the hard times, and regardless of what you hear the Aussies say, they were the origins of such things as the Pavlova, the Lamington, Farlap, and Russell Crowe. Though, to be fair, they can have Russell Crowe, we don't want him. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!